Joe, you were saying you want to do a what? Such as? Okay. So it's a preview. It's a sneak tease. Sneak tease. Yeah, you know what? I wrote that out because I'm not, we're really emerging in front of the audience here. I feel definitely engorged or swollen in some kind of way. Did you think it was funny? Woo, girl, I do feel a little goofy. I had a new drink on my way home from work. This lady I work with told me about lady. She's my age. I didn't want that to come across as an age sort of a vibe one way or the other. Fox News does? Yeah, I don't know. Oh, yeah. So, I had a venti hot dirty chai latte. Dirty chai tea latte. Dirty means they add 2 shots of espresso to it. So I am bright and lively, and there's all sorts of variants in my diet in the past 24 hours and whatnot. So we'll see how we do. Very exciting episode. Actually, I haven't seen you, Joe, in a couple weeks because we had the holiday with the giving of thanks to the genocidal crusaders of old, and then I had an episode that I kind of did on Zoom with our good friend Zaza Goodbreak that just came out as we're recording this. That just came out a couple days ago. The response has been great. If you've not listened to that episode yet for some reason, it'll just play automatically right after this one as you're hearing it. So really good friend of mine, and we got to catch up in a way that was really meaningful. So really great. Joe, did you listen to that episode? Did you enjoy the Zaza Goodbreak experience? I've gotten a lot of direct feedback from listeners. That people that I know that listen to the show, of which there are at least a couple dozen, which I really appreciate. We have, again, our metrics are going up all the time, and I think that's because they're cumulative, and so I'm just going to let that be the case. As you see, we're still always experimenting with tools and lighting, and I have a vision for where this guerrilla DIY kind of getting to know you phase of the podcast is going to go as we develop more of our sort of necessities. So, Joe, can you go ahead and check your mic for me? Right there. Who? Oh, I know. I'm just, me. It's something I'm kind of working on. Joe, are you checking that microphone? I'm just making sure. I just don't want to miss you. My brother brought that up. That was his favorite part, was the, he said, he thought we did it on purpose, so I shouldn't have told him. He thought we did it intentionally, so as to, I don't know why he thought we would do that. It's like it was some kind of artistic
well, it did seem kind of sarcastic. Also, the PlayStation 5 or whatever just came out.
If that was like a deep kind of artistic statement about how we feel about that.
Yeah, it was very Jack White SNL impromptu. After
that's funny,
Eddie Van Halen died.
Great.
Can you explain that reference so I don't just sound like an idiot?
No, everyone gets it. Yeah, he was on SNL coincidentally after Eddie Van Halen. Yeah, it was great. God is good.
Guitars.
God is good. Yeah, that's true. Woo. I've always kind of I've always wondered if I'd be like a good detective. Have you ever thought? Have we talked about this? Have I ever screamed at you that, oh God, I should be a detective?
Yeah, you're always catching me red-handed.
Yeah, I can sniff them out like a truffle hog.
It's so red.
I feel like I can figure shit out.
It.
What?
Nothing.
And for example, based on the choice of music at my Walgreens over here, whoever picks that music is 1, recently heartbroken, and 2, cognitively impaired in some way. There's no way. There's definitely some kind of either a trauma or developmental inhibition. It's all Nash pop, like pop country music, like really contemporary, like pop country, like bro country, but like none of the good stuff, like even from that kind of joke of an art form. It's all like that Cash Machine. Like I don't even know the artists' names. Do you know
like Billy Ray Cyrus?
No. Like contemporary, like current, like hits, I guess, from that kind of machine. It's really loud in the grocery and liquor aisles, where they also keep the sparkling water that I enjoy. Praise up, bless.
It's frustrating, those songs, because it completely depends on the accent of the singer that makes it country. Like, because the music is 90s grunge, the actual instrumentals.
Oh my God, you're lucky if it's that much actual like guitars and stuff. Some of it's not even really that.
Sometimes they'll throw in a banjo just to bring it back home.
Yeah,
but most of the time it'll just be like
maybe some fiddle.
Yeah,
it's really great.
It's just alive.
So that's in my Walgreens, cranked, and also my Walgreens, I was just talking to my brother about this, is completely boarded up. Even the glass doors, which never have to lock because it's a 24-hour store, everything's all boarded up. And I guess it went up like the week before the election. I guess it's going to stay up until the inauguration because it's still completely boarded up. And Jesus fucking Christ, Joe, you and me were talking about this the other day. If you're in St. Louis and you think you give a shit about anything, make the fucking trip and go over to Natural Bridge and Kings Highway. Just go through that McDonald's. I've never gotten sick from there. I always have a pretty decent experience at that McDonald's. They never get my food wrong. But look around the fucking neighborhood right there at that intersection at 11 a.m. or anytime. I'm sure it's great. It's a literal caricature of a dystopian fucking hellscape. It's this literal apocalypse is alive at the intersection of Natural Bridge and Kings Highway. And down the block at Union and Natural Bridge is not much better. This is like up by where I work.
Yeah, that's heavy,
and
man.
Seriously, it's exactly like you would dream about in the movie. There's several homeless people working every angle of the intersection. One of them is very visibly what's the word? It's just it's such an exaggerated form of
like
how you would expect. It's so like a stereotype or a cliche about how visibly homeless some of these people are.
A caricature, a vignette.
Yeah, it's absolutely that way. It's just exactly like you would dream that would be, except it's just like the apocalypse up there. There's people like hobbling with masks on to, bus stops. And it's just like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, except all the fast food restaurants are open. That's really the only difference is we have way more infrastructure surviving than we thought we would when shit finally hit the fan. But you would hardly know that at the intersection of Natural Bridge and Kings Highway here in St. Louis, up on the north side. You wouldn't know it unless you looked at all the drive-thrus that are open and backed up around the building.
It's so funny because that, the road.
What do you need?
Yeah, I mean,
what do you need? People don't have homes or food, and they're wandering the streets with masks on because the air is poisonous.
Right.
It's overcast.
Yeah.
It's cold, but then it's raining, and then it's not, and it's awful. And even the sketchy motels are closed. The buildings that aren't boarded up look like they should be. I mean, it's sad that there's parts of the world that are developed, but also look, I can get a McDonald's hot and spicy chicken sandwich. I can add a slice of cheese for 49 cents. I can get 30 of those for like $1.
The McRib is back.
The McRib is back, hot and fresh. But I've literally seen people strung out on heroin, wobbling around that parking lot while I'm waiting for my food, just trying not to collapse. Like, it's just...
Sir.
It's...
I forgot what I wanted. Never mind.
Yeah. Oh my God. He didn't know I was there. He was no threat to me at all. I don't feel unsafe when I'm up at that McDonald's.
It's just like...
which is the nearest McDonald's to where I work, which is why I'm at the McDonald's.
The Road is a perfect analogy if you're thinking about the film because they have those just beat up kind of coats And then on top of that, the masks are kind of reminiscent of the Book of Eli because they all had to wear sunglasses. And, there were some people that had like, sunglasses from like Party City that were clearly made sarcastically. And then they are now their primary form to avoid blindness, which is the masks. The way the masks were. The can throwing.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm an artist.
But it's so funny. It's hilarious. It really is. You just look around like, how bad do I need this Diet Coke right now?
No, I couldn't have the empty can here because I kept going for it and it looks bad on camera. If I'm going for it and there's nothing in it, but I got to wet my whistle, honey. No, Book of Eli was another good one. Tom Waits was in that one. I love him.
Yeah, it's so weird.
So, he pops up when you least, it's great. And Gary Oldman, I mean, it's and then I have an aunt, distant, I guess a great aunt really, she's my mom's uncle's wife.
Are you going to say she loves Denzel Washington?
Well, she loved that movie because she's one of those charismatic Catholics they call themselves, I think, where
they love the movie Taken.
Well, they're very, I don't know about that, but they're very devoutly and openly Catholic, which is not a bad thing.
In a romantic way.
I don't feel one way or the other about
as if it's an actual religion, kind of that kind
of. But they do a lot of things together, like they go out and see movies that are either controversial or popular with, that base, or they do the things where they go because somebody found the face of the Savior in gravel somewhere or on a pancake or something. Mm-hmm. Like they go to those kind of things.
Shroud.
It's so great. And she can talk to you about the Blessed Mother for 47 minutes. And it's great. She's great. But, she loved the Book of Eli because it turned out the book he was carrying was the Bible the whole time. And no, spoiler alert. Sorry.
If you're a Christian, it was blatantly apparent
if you haven't seen
early in the film. But if you're an atheist,
hit from 2011, if it was even that recent, Book of Eli. Yeah, he's carrying a book that Gary Oldman wants. It's a Bible and it's in Braille because it turns out, isn't he like blind?
That's the actual twist that you spoiled for everybody.
Yeah, not just that it was
you
the
didn't
Bible.
know he was blind the whole time.
Yeah, they imply a lot about the Bible and the power of the Bible and whatnot, which is I think a great angle for an apocalyptic kind of Mad Max kind of environment. Yeah. I enjoyed that movie, but she really loved it in a way that I found very entertaining. Because it's very much like a dystopian blockbuster. It had Mila Kunis in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What does she make Jim Beam now? Is that her thing?
Jim Beam and Ashton Kutcher.
Ashton Kutcher and JimBeam.gov. We have a very exciting guest today. We have a very exciting guest that we are going to be on a Zoom call with here in about 15 minutes. And so we will take a quick break to reset when that comes up. But, I mean, Jesus.
You're done?
No. I just wanted to give people kind of a heads up before we get too deep into some of my deeper research here. Joe, did I tell you about the time I ended up in a pool next to Eric Greitens?
No.
You know Eric Greitens.
I recall the
name, the mugshot.
I know. Yeah, the former.
So Eric Greitens was elected governor.
That's the
of the state of Missouri a couple of years ago, and was then kind of he resigned because he got arrested over like some quote revenge porn kind of drama, having taken a picture of a mistress.
I thought it was bribery,
but it was something like he paid somebody off or something,
laptop.
And then the
Greitens.
But then what happened was like the mistress's husband was all mad about the photo and rose a stink after he was elected. So it was very dramatic. And that's how we ended up with this guy Parsons that we love so much. Great. And anyway, there was another scandal about Eric Greitens, and he was using campaign funds apparently to buy a chalet, we'll call it, in a resort community. You know, every town kind of has a woodland resort community with lake space and kind of, A-frames and whatnot. This is our kind of version here locally, and he bought a place there. I remember hearing that story. And then, I happened to be in that woodland resort community about a year after he was, disgracefully exiled from, the public sphere here in St. Louis. And then I'm in the pool at the resort community at their little pool, little clubhouse, little joint, got me a little biscuit, got me a little piece of crumb, some French toast sticks. And I'm in the pool and I turn around. I'm like, this guy swims right in front of me. Right. Like seriously, like I could, this was pre-COVID. Right. And I remember it was like that movie, The Imposter, the documentary about the guy that pretended to be this missing kid, but then he found out that they killed him or whatever. Another spoiler alert. Sorry. But I recognized like the shape of his ear. Like I got this weird profile of him, but he was so close to me. And I was like, because his mugshot was my profile picture on Facebook for a week or so after that happened. And so I really got used to seeing his face whenever I was in Messenger talking to somebody or, checking on my grandparents on Facebook. And then he's right in front of me in the pool. And I kind of felt gross at first. I was like, what do I do? It's the water. His water's touching my water. We have the same water. And I get really weird about pools like that. Like my wife will make fun of me because I have to like wash my hair immediately after getting out of the pool because I feel like there's baby urine in my hair. Slimy. You know what I mean? It's just
try going to the lake.
That I won't get in a lake. I can't do it.
Dude.
I had, you know what? People always make fun of me for this, but I had my fun. I had times where I played in a creek under a bridge, and we several times we did that, and I have gone on float trips, down the Crystal River in a canoe. I've done that in rafts. I've camped in a tent. I've camped in an RV. I've done all the Midwestern kind of outdoorsy kind of thing. It's not something I choose to recreate or do. But I have had my fill of those things. So yeah, and I'm kind of I've always been weird about my hands. I don't want gross things on me. Call me crazy. So that was like one of those times where I'm looking at the disgraced former governor. Yeah. And he's not only infiltrated my lovely exclusive resort community, my woodland safe haven, but his water was on my water, Joe.
Yeah, I'm looking at his. There's so many. I mean, because when they go after him, they go after everything, and this is just. Well,
it's hard now because now he's got a shit list, and I think he was the guy. That I think his campaign was like he could like dismantle and then reassemble and load and fire a AR-15 blindfolded because he was like a Marine or something, which is great. Thank you for your service. My brother thinks it's weird, like the water thing. Like he thinks it's weird that I don't want a roommate. Like we have this great bedroom loft space on the second floor of our home that is totally temperature controlled and has electricity and everything. It's not like gross. It's finished and whatnot, but there's no bathroom up there. I really don't want to share a bathroom.
Yeah.
I don't want people's water touching my water. I don't know what it's about.
I think Johnny Cash said that. I think he said the key to a healthy marriage is separate bathrooms.
Did he really say that?
Mm-hmm. And he's just a genius.
That's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
That's, because that second time he got married, it seemed to work out. They kind of died, still married.
Yeah. It was tough, though. I actually got to sit down with Johnny Cash's former therapist, and he, was a real boomer therapist, completely breaking, patient
confidentiality. Those laws are kind of new.
I mean, yeah. He was so proud of all the dirt he had on Johnny Cash. I was like, you're kind of a horrible person.
He should write a book.
I'm sure he has.
They probably paid him not to.
Yeah. I don't think you can write a book. If you're a therapist, you can't write a book about your.
Joe, have you been following the Monolith at all?
Can we not?
You don't want to talk about the Monolith at all? I think it's kind of died.
It's so dumb because it's so clearly not like what? What were they distracting us from? Those major New York Times? Really?
Yeah.
You're like, we don't know where it came from.
Yeah, it wasn't even in New York.
If you saw a penny on the street, you wouldn't be like, oh my God, what is that?
Yeah. Good. Okay, so we'll not do the Monolith then.
I mean,
it's totally no, I don't. It's totally the South Park ending of it too. The most recent thing I saw is a bunch of hillbillies beat the shit out of it because they thought it was because they proclaimed white power over the potential aliens.
Yeah,
right?
When you post on New York Times.
Oh, is that why they hated it?
They wanted it
because it was the leftist agenda that the aliens were coming. So it's seriously, it's like a joke. It's like an episode of South Park where it's like, oh my God, the Monolith. What are we going to do? The world is ending. Guys, we got to figure out what to do with the Monolith. And then Kenny's family goes and kicks the shit out of it because white power. Right? Isn't that what that looks like?
I know how to solve this.
They beat it up. It's nuts. I don't know what we're gonna do.
I mean, like, what is this? I was about to say something horrible.
Yeah, so fuck the monolith.
What else is on here? The ramblings.
God, Al may be good for this. Our friend Alfred Ludwig, attorney at law, is coming up on the podcast here in a minute. And I wrote down this headline I saw this week. Quantum experiment suggests there is no objective reality.
Why? Because he went to law school? Okay, just because he went to law school doesn't mean he's like a physicist and can comment on that. I can comment on that.
How do you feel?
Level.
How do you feel about that?
I'm sorry.
No, I want to know. That's why I brought it up now.
I just like, why do you turn to him? If we were in a room and it was him and me.
No, I was just thinking, like, you didn't want to talk
I
about
have a computer.
You didn't want to talk about the monolith. And then I had prepared something about quantum reality. But if you don't want to talk about the monolith and the living South Park joke that happened on my newsfeed this week, then we could talk about the quantum physics. I didn't say, Al, you're right. You're right.
Can't believe,
you know what? Lawyers are fucking morons.
I just can't believe New York Times is sitting there like, yes, this, the voter fraud is impossible. It's impossible for voter fraud to occur. By the way, mysterious monolith, we don't know where it came from. Probably aliens. Thanks, New York Times. Same day.
Al.
What's up?
Oh my God, is that Al? Is it happening? Is it happening now?
I haven't seen you since Jake's wedding.
All right, now my sound is on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I could always hear you.
Of course, he has a pro.
Are you not wearing headphones?
I really haven't fucked with this mic very much.
You're not wearing headphones.
Should I wear headphones?
It's easier. It's going to sound better. And also, I have no evidence that your microphone's even on, because it could be the microphone on your screen. I do not know. But this isn't live, so it's not a big deal. I didn't know you were going to be in the call already. I was just booting it up so that I could receive you. We were just talking about how fucking stupid lawyers are.
Isn't that so typical of a lawyer to have just like a pro audio setup, and he's not even.
He's also a professional bassist.
I mean, an open office.
He's got a big bass, like a wood one.
Can he even play it?
Oh yeah, he can thump.
Did he just buy all the essential gig stuff?
Yeah, he's a blues lawyer. Mostly.
Blues. Do you mean like his genre is blues, or he defends the blues hockey team?
That's a term on like the gear pages.
That's hilarious.
Did I tell you the travesty?
Lawyer. No, that's right. That's funny.
Did I tell you the travesty I encountered today on a gear page?
Oh yeah, you said something.
Brother,
racist.
I didn't know that calling someone a Zionist shill was anti-Semitic, and then I didn't know the guy's name was Goldstein. Ugh.
Like it wasn't like Zimmerman or something.
Well, I just hadn't looked at his name, and I really just threw that out there because that's what this one guy called this other guy on this podcast I listened to, and I just thought it'd be funny. I was totally just bored out of my mind. Al, can you hear me?
Yes, is this better?
Oh, dude, that's perfect. That's what I wanted this whole time.
It turns out it did have the microphone from my laptop toggled in Zoom, which I didn't realize was.
I know. That's why they pay me the big bucks. I may not even have to edit too much of this out because it looks like it's working.
Is that a Coors sparkling seltzer?
What are you drinking there?
The old
Chicago Pilsner.
Chicago.
Oh, really?
Little microbrew.
Yeah, this thing here. I got a
Maplewood.
I got the
brought to you by Maplewood Brewery.
I got the cherry limeade,
also
from
local.
Sam's Club. But they were out of this one. I just re-upped, and they brought me the actual La Croix, the good stuff.
There is a major difference. You think it should be the same, that there's something non-magical about
radically
LaCroix,
different.
but
The flavors
really
come from
is
different
something
places.
about
This
it
is
different than
probably
every
just
other
citric
brand.
acid.
How's the finish on it? When it finally
It's got good
slides down
mouthfeel.
your-
It's got a good airy mouthfeel. Oh, are you talking about the Pilsner?
No. Al, how was the how long did it take you to like be done with all the election stuff? Is it just like a 1 day thing?
So, Al, you can hear us, correct?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay.
And I'm hearing Joe right now, so
Great.
I can't see Joe, which is
No.
somewhat
Joe is not on
but
camera.
I
He's
can
behind
hear
me
Joe.
in the dark.
pre-recorded.
So yes. So Al, let me just kind of seg us into kind of the conversation we wanted to have. So Alfred here is a very good friend of mine. He currently plays bass when live music is allowed to happen with me, with Jacob V and the Yes Men. And he's also not only an experienced kind of musician that I've had a lot of great working experience with, but also an attorney. And you're involved in electioneering in a way that the election is something we have had to talk a lot about on the podcast so far. So when we first started it, there's a lot of questions we had, and I sent you some stuff that I kind of wanted to get to, but where do you want to start, buddy?
Well, probably with the term electioneering, which I believe is a crime.
Exactly.
And so I would like to disclaim any involvement in criminal electioneering, but I have actually been an election observer for a couple of different elections over the last few years. So what about it would you like? Where would you like to start? I mean, I know there's lots of questions.
Which elections?
So okay. So kind of let's start with your experience, just so we know what context we're going into. Yeah, and I was really accusing your witnessing of any potential electioneering. Thanks for the vocab kind of thing. There. So let's start with sort of just your kind of background with that kind of stuff, and then we'll get into some of the more dramatic topical stuff.
So in order to give you how I got into it, I think it's kind of some basic background in how Missouri elections work, because everything I've done is in Missouri, as a Missouri resident. So the way Missouri elections work, we have a system that requires 2 election judges at each polling place, and they're the only people. The election judges and certain very specific categories of people are allowed in the polling places other than the voters themselves. Each polling place has a Republican judge and a Democratic judge. That's built into the statute. So you've got, on the one hand, the official elections, authority employees essentially who work there. I've not been one of those. So I've known some people who have done that. They're all great people, but you have to basically pick a party and say, I'm the Democratic judge and I'm the Republican judge,
right,
in order to do that. What I've done is then there's another category of people who's allowed in the polling places called an election observer. And again, you have to sort of sign on with one of the 2 parties in order to do that. So, in Missouri, as I'm led to believe anyway, the Democrats have often put up election observers to work the polling places, in various roles. The Republicans in recent years, certainly in the St. Louis area, have not even participated in that process for whatever reason, but they have the right to do it. But anyone else, if you're not voting, you're not even supposed to be there. So in order to, show up at the polls and be an election observer, you have to say, I'm the Democratic observer. You have to get appointed by the party. You have to be on a list like 3 weeks before the election. And then you have to be, have your badge and whatnot, and be officially by state law on this list that's authorized to be in the room. So I personally was on the Democratic side, because I don't know that I've ever heard of a Republican observer in the last few elections being there. But basically, then your role, our instructions have always been from the party officials. And this is like Jack Kotar is one of the guys, he's an alderman from St. Louis. You may know who he is, but he's one of the guys that sort of, does the orientation for the lawyers. It's all lawyers who do this, who are election observers for the Democratic Party. And sort of gives the role of what we're doing. And what we've always been told is we're there to help people vote. We're there to make sure that votes are counted, and the election judges, if they have questions, to help them interpret state law. That's one of the reasons they only use lawyers to do it, and to sort of assist in any logistics. Just basically be there, help out. Don't get in the way. You're technically a challenger. You have the right to be to challenge votes, but that's not the role that we have ever fulfilled. It's not the role I've ever fulfilled. We're there basically to observe. But also, in prior elections, and I'm in the county, so this is different depending on which county you're in. And in prior elections, there's always been, you have your polling place, right? And if you go to the wrong polling place, you're not supposed to vote there. So you often have people show up at the wrong polling place, and just simple things like, well, actually, you need to go to this polling place, or this is what you need to do, or you're not actually registered. We help check.
And that's part of your role there.
I'm sorry, say that again.
That's part of your role there is the redirection part of where they're supposed to go. My first kind of, go ahead. I'm sorry. I got a bunch of, you're doing great.
No, I mean, it's our general directive is to help people vote, to make sure people get where they're supposed to go, do what they need to do, make sure no votes are uncounted. You've heard of these provisional ballots, I'm sure. To help people cast provisional ballots if that's their right to do, and to make sure that the election judges know what people's rights are, so they're not turning away people and saying, well, you just can't vote, which is a thing that happens, but it's usually done through ignorance. It's not done through maliciousness.
I love that. So my first natural kind of follow-up question from when we got started here is, this is all great stuff too. You're doing great. You look good. I love your little is that Ralph Lauren?
It is.
Yeah. And my first question is really, so why is your role in that process interesting in the context of this current election? I mean, is it more concerning the national dialogue that makes it interesting? Because maybe one possibility in my head is that maybe you didn't witness anything that would even be remotely funky, and maybe the dialogue nationally is blown out of proportion and it's unhealthy, or maybe you have the opposite experience where you're like, yeah, elections are messed up. I don't know, but that was the one thing that emerges because we were very excited to have this conversation, you and I. So,
Well,
yeah.
What I can say that might shed some light on this is I've done this a few times, and in each time, the election judges I mentioned are partisan. So you have a Republican judge, you have a Democratic judge. In my experience, these people are just gems. They're there. It's an extremely long day. They get there at 5 a.m. to open up the polls. They finish at like 7 p.m. when the polls close. They're there for another hour or two, or however long it takes to count. If people are in line when the polls close, they have to be allowed to vote, so it can go longer than that. So you've got these, basically what amount to that. It's not quite volunteer, but it may as well be volunteer for what I understand they get paid. It's a public service role for the election judges who are there just to do their job to make sure everybody's vote can get counted. And what I've seen personally is that there are very, very few issues. Most of the issues relate to long lines and trying to redirect people or to figure out how to get people to wait or understand how, that long they have to wait for this, and make sure that the right people are in the right places and people aren't waiting in line for 2 hours to go to the wrong polling place. But overall, and I will say Missouri is clearly not a target for shenanigans because of the way that our electoral votes generally go, and how red this state certainly has become. It was a swing state, years ago, but it really isn't anymore. So it's not like in Ohio or a Wisconsin or a Michigan where there's really a chance for swinging the vote on one side or the other. But local elections matter, congressional elections matter, and that these things are just as important in a lot of ways. But I have never seen anything other than utter professionalism among election staff, the judges, the people involved, and frankly, the voters. I mean, everybody's been psyched and happy to be there.
Right. I mean, because it takes a lot of enthusiasm to vote because it is so optional, right? It's not, I mean, that's why so much of the rhetoric is just begging people to vote, not even telling them who to vote for, really, right? But I think one thing that I thought of that was so interesting when you were explaining that is, what is the mode? I think normal people that can't picture serving in that capacity for something like that, a lot of people, most people don't have something in their life that they kind of do that's like that. So what would you tell those people is the primary motivation to all of these kind of people? Is it strictly the passion for the law and the procedure of a free election?
I think it's a devotion to the principles of democracy at the end of the day. I mean, I've done a lot of talking. It's not just lawyers, obviously. The observers are lawyers, but the election judges and the people working the polls, they're not all judges. There's people that show up to help direct lines and just be there to make sure everybody gets where they're going. They're all just excited to help the process, help people speak their minds, and help them have a voice in this country. And it's a public service. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I certainly agree, but I think it's an important conversation to have out loud for. So being that we know that locally we're not necessarily the target for too much shenanigans, certainly not to the extent that we're hearing about so much in the news being alleged elsewhere. But I guess because we don't have to follow any kind of a structure here, we're not necessarily limited on time on my end.
We'll do what you want.
Yeah, Trump hasn't
take this where you want to go.
Yeah, so Trump hasn't conceded yet, and I heard Candace Owens the other day says she'll think he'll be inaugurated again if it goes to the Supreme Court. Like, what is that? Any of that serious? Is that really worth anyone's time? That kind of conversation.
It's an interesting question because no is the answer in a sane world where the rule of law has any meaning, and every court case you've seen bears this out, right? You've got zero successes. I think the few things they pointed to successful litigation actions on are things like, well, you made the election judges stand 6 feet away when they're allowed to stand 4 feet away. It's absolute minutia like that. It's not. There has yet to be a court ruling that finds any evidence of any wrongdoing in a meaningful way in any of the jurisdictions, and they've done a full court press. So it's not like this is there's an isolated suit or two they've lost. They've lost every suit that they've filed. They've lost every action almost to a single number that they filed in every way. So the court system, the legal system, if it has any meaning, is saying there is nothing here. And professionals have looked at the evidence, and we have yet to see anything compelling that evidences any sort of meaningful wrongdoing or purposeful wrongdoing, other than the typical human errors you have in every election, right?
Such as.
Did you get that?
Such as, what are those typical errors?
Well, I mean, there's always differences in the vote counts in various jurisdictions. So, you might have 571 votes, and this is minutia that I'm not personally familiar with. So, I'm making up a hypothetical, but you might have 571 votes tallied, and you somehow come out with a number of 570 at the end of the day, where one of those votes was invalidated or whatever. And then the rolls. There's always a long history of certain discrepancy in the numbers in minor, single digit, double digit type numbers within any jurisdiction. Those things are well documented. They've played out almost every election. Nobody who seriously looked at this issue, as far as I can tell, thinks that they've ever done anything to swing or influence anything but the most close of all elections, where you're talking about 5 voters difference.
And would you say that Chris Krebs cooked crispy bacon?
I don't know who Chris Krebs is.
Oh, holy shit.
I should. Hang on.
Oh, I'm going to light you up. Krebs is like a KR. So Chris Krebs.
Oh, okay. No, I do know who Krebs is. Yeah. I saw 60 Minutes last week.
Did he cook some crispy bacon?
I'm sorry. The name just didn't ring a bell. Probably too many beers.
Christopher
tonight.
Krebs? I had dreams about Chris Krebs. We call him Krusty Krebs.
I have a question.
Here's what's crazy. What's crazy about this. You got a minute? Joe, you got a question, please, before I go into Crispy Krebs.
Mr. Krebs, what would a situation where somebody like in a position of power, where around your peers, what would it look like if somebody did want to swing the election? How would that work? And like, what kind of character would that be? Like, what kind of corrupt, like if this did happen, if you did see corruption in Missouri, how would it happen most likely?
And this is a completely hypothetical, legally distinct from reality, hypothetical conversation.
You described how it could.
I think what I'm hearing Joe ask is, if there were any shenanigans, what would that look like on a macro level at one polling place?
Well, and you just hit on a very key point. You'd have to do it polling place by polling place, and I think there's been quite a bit of scholarship on this recently. But, one of the things that makes our election system, if you will, unhackable or very difficult to hack is that we have more than a million, I don't know the number, but, however many there are precincts to do their own individual voting with paper ballots.
Yeah.
We've gone away from these Diebold systems in the early 2000s that had very questionable sort of software and no paper record, where the electoral authorities are really looking at paper ballots and using paper ballots almost across the board now.
And now they have... It's still a paper. Like, I use the machine, but it's punching it on a card that is then stored in the machine. Like there is a paper record now.
That's right.
And you're talking
even the ones with machines, and I can only speak of the county because it's where I've been. And the county is, you're using a Sharpie to fill in a paper on a piece.
No, I got to have a touch screen
and feeding it into the machine at the end of the day. So how can you hack that exactly? You could do it on a precinct by precinct basis if you had, a series of electoral judges on both sides of the aisle, because you've got one Republican and one Democrat in every precinct who were dedicated to making sure that this precinct would change, have some fraudulent total. So just using Missouri, you would have to do that in every precinct in which you wanted to shift the total. Either that, or you would have to somehow hack the box, and I mean literally physically hack the box, because these ballots go into a box which is secure, and it is taken away by the county election authority at the end of the night. They show up with what essentially amounts to like your cartoon old timey picture of an armored car type scenario where they take these ballots away and they're put in a secure location. So, and unless you had access to those ballots at a central location at the end of the night before they're counted, you could swap them out in a sort of Battlestar Galactica scenario, which if you've seen that episode, you know what I'm talking about, but I may be dating myself here, where they literally take the box of ballots and they remove it and they swap it with the fake box of ballots, right before the count happens.
You're thinking Ocean's 11, I think.
Go on, Joe.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
No, he was insinuating that you were mistaking that to the swap in the George Clooney remake of Ocean's 11, where it looks like the duffel bag's full of money, but it's all pornography.
But you chose Battlestar
Galactica.
Sorry,
Joe is young. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Battlestar Galactica, kids, look it up. It's a great show.
Is that separate from Stargate?
It actually postdates Stargate, believe it or not.
Oh, but like post Firefly.
I believe it's post Firefly.
Jesus.
It was the thing that kept the Sci-Fi Network alive for the years that it was around.
It used to be the Sci-Fi Channel.
And then
somebody said something about flash drives at these units where people are voting, and I'm like, there aren't any inputs. There would be an exposed input at a voting booth. What is
Alfred,
it? It's not an iPad.
As a voting citizen, I just want to say that in your future election supervising endeavors as a public servant, if you see a flash drive, karate chop that person. If I see, don't let me see
counting,
a thumb
like I said,
disk.
it's all paper. So there is no flash drive interaction. There is the machine count at the end where you slide the ballots into, and I suppose you could hack that machine count and change it on that machine for that location.
That is kind of an antiquated.
But at the end of the day, if there's ever a recount, you've got the paper ballots, which would show that machine count was wildly off, and would immediately leave you with a sort of traceable point of contact where there was something going on.
Yeah.
So, to really answer your question, Joe, if you wanted to hack an election, you do what, at least the narrative around the Russians did in 2016, which is hack the voters. You don't hack the election itself. You go out with disinformation and you make people believe things so that they vote a certain way.
Like getting
but if people are going to vote that way, it's very, very, very difficult to, get into the system in this day and age and change it, because we've gone retrograde. In 2004, when you had these Diebold machines with this, software that was opaque, and votes were apparently being changed on the fly from almost always Democratic to Republican. Shockingly, then there was a different question in my mind back in those days. Now that I've seen what we've done since then, we've really moved away from machines. The machines that exist have a paper trail or exist only to count the paper ballots that were there. And there's virtually no way on a large scale operation you could do this from a central point. You would have to have a vast conspiracy of many bodies at many locations simultaneously to do anything like that.
And you're safe to speak for all of the other jurisdictions, all the other states. Like, you're safe, like that's all the same across the board.
No, it's not. And I only have the experience I have, but my understanding, based on everything I've read, all the scholarship, all the reporting around it, is that that story is played out not just in Missouri,
right,
but in a lot of other states where they've really moved away from these sort of opaque, hackable machines into things that do keep a record. There's been too much bad press. There's been too many questions in the last 20 years about machines that did not keep records, that pretty much all of the election authorities realized they needed to have some credibility in the election system.
Right.
They needed to have some paper record on file for what actually happened on that day.
So is that maybe not the case in these handful of states where there still is some debate and some conversation? I'm thinking Pennsylvania was going on, Georgia may even still be kind of a thing, and Wisconsin. Like, are those places that maybe don't have as kind of hack-proof election processes like we would here?
I can't speak for what Pennsylvania does, for instance, but I've not read anything that leads me to believe it's any different anywhere else in that regard. I've read a number of reporters who have looked into this in the last few weeks, and written about it and debunked what the myth is about, how this has been hacked. And, to every report, they have concluded that it would be virtually impossible to do this from a central location. You'd have to do it on a location by location on a machine by machine basis. There is no, like, you can't just play the old school 90s hacker movie,
Right.
type in system on some, dot matrix screen and get in and immediately change the vote
Like
Ferris
Sneakers?
Bueller style from a central place, right?
Did you ever
It's just
see
not a thing that can
Sneakers?
happen.
It's called Hackers, Jake.
No, did you ever see Sneakers?
Hackers is one of them.
Yeah.
Sneakers was good. That was like Robert Redford and some other old guys.
And I forget her name, but she's the main lead character in Battlestar Galactica as well.
Jesus Christ.
So there's a degree of separation between Sneakers and Battlestar
this brings me to a
Galactica.
point that I was talking to Joe about just before we brought you on. Is I read an article that surmised that some research is suggesting that there is no such thing as objective reality. And would you feel like that's maybe the case because we were just able to connect Sneakers to Battlestar Galactica without planning it ahead of time?
Through Mary McDonnell is the name of the actress, for what it's worth.
Who?
Mary McDonnell. She was also in Dances with Wolves.
Jake,
Was she the white lady in the?
Yes.
She was the one in the teepee.
Yes.
Really? Now that is interesting. And she was
Also
in
in
Stargate SG-1.
Now that I did not know.
No, I was asking you. Isn't that what you said? She was on Stargate?
She was in Battlestar Galactica.
Son of a. Oh, that's hard. So, okay.
I actually do feel old that you guys don't know Battlestar.
It's not that I haven't heard of it.
It's not that old.
It's not that I haven't heard of it.
Everybody's a lawyer. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what am I supposed to go watch Battlestar? I watch when I'm at work. I watch The Walking Dead. That's usually what I'm watching if I'm at work. So lately, I've just figured out I have commercial-free access to Hulu, so I've been watching a lot of It's Always Sunny. But it's hard for me to pay attention to stuff. It's hard. Like if I go through commercials, I forget what I'm watching. So I really feel like we're really allowing me to not lose sleep over some of these conspiracies I was building up in my head. So let me just kind of cleanse my palate here real quick. So where I was going with this is I think it's pretty safe to say, as I kind of had guessed before we got you on the phone here, Alfred, but that perhaps where a lot of the question persists for a lot of people is the discussion or stigma around the mail-in ballot procedures. And I know you can only speak to kind of what you know about that locally, but is that really something that you think is concerning? Is that something that would be more hackable than the way we do elections in person?
So on the one hand, what you don't have in a mail-in ballot situation, especially one, I'll say, unlike Missouri's system where there's no notarization required, and there were circumstances in Missouri that where no notarization was required, but they were limited. But there is a possibility, I suppose, that someone could vote for you, sign your name, send it in, and no one would have any way of knowing unless and until you showed up to say, I didn't vote for that. But what these allegations that there's dead people voting through the mail, or that they're stacking the vote through a bunch of votes that shouldn't have been counted because these people were ineligible to vote. What you would have is a 1-for-1, sort of fraudulent vote on behalf of a real voter in a mailing situation that would be hard to verify. But what you wouldn't have is the ability to say, I'm going to throw 1 million votes into the mail-in ballots and swing the election, because you have 1 million real people out there who might have showed up to the polls to vote after that, might have also sent their mail-in
the
ballot.
level of coordination you would have to then in some way guarantee for yourself, at least as the saboteur, that those people were not going to go ahead and vote, correct?
Well, you would, at best, you would have sort of a double vote situation where that would be, be ordinarily voter fraud if somebody did that, where they sent in 2 mail-in ballots, or they sent in a mail-in ballot and then voted without, doing whatever state law procedure allowed for them to retract their mail-in vote, et cetera. At worst, you've got conflicting, sort of 2 different people voting under the same name, right? And, those raise red flags. Those are the types of things the system catches and the system has caught. And, the 15 or whatever cases of electoral or voting fraud, rather, that have happened in the last, 30 years that we know of, were things like that, where somebody, voted twice. They sent in an absentee ballot or voted, somewhere else.
And then
They
went
didn't
and
have the
voted
right
anyway.
to vote, and they showed up and voted anyway. In some cases, casting provisional ballots, which they technically have the right to do in certain states, certainly Missouri.
A provisional ballot for my younger listeners who don't know what that word means.
Like me.
So a provisional ballot is what you cast. If you show up and they say, well, we're not sure you have the right to vote here, under Missouri law, at least, and I believe the law is similar in many, many states, you have the right to cast what they call a provisional ballot, which is to say a ballot that may or may not be counted. And, you sort of give your information. If you didn't have, you were required in Missouri to bring certain forms of ID to the polls, right? So you show up without that ID, you say, I don't have it, but I want to cast a provisional ballot. I'll come back with my ID, or I'll show the election authority my ID. There's ways of doing that. The percentage of provisional ballots that are actually cast versus the ones that get caught is something like, 5%, 10% of the ones that actually get cast that actually end up counting in the election. It's very unusual. In jurisdictions within Missouri, I think the city is still this way. Did you guys have to show up to your polling place, or could you go anywhere?
Well, you know what? We didn't test that because I tested the day of the actual election at my normal polling place.
I could go anywhere.
I didn't have my little card, but I brought I had my driver's license, and I got the new Real ID that's like super legit.
And it had an eagle on it.
It's like a double holographic. I keep it in a little case. And so we did that, but it was very, very light. And I was seeing a lot of my friends and family in the county, locally at least here. And for my abroad listeners, St. Louis and St. Louis County are extremely separate culturally and legally, but they're right. It's right there. And so all my friends and family that live just west of me in the county were voting seemingly at one of a handful of polling places with no kind of appointment or anything, but they were voting early in person as an absentee kind of COVID concern kind of thing. That was kind of the hack.
So the county instituted in the last two elections something called open polling. So in the county, I used to have to go to the rec center in Webster right by my house. This year I was working the polls in Olivet, and I voted in Olivet just because I'm a county voter. I can vote anywhere I want. What they did was they set up computers so that they don't have your printed ballot for your polling place with your local elections on it. They literally print it out as you register in. So all my Webster elections were printed out on the laser printer as I was there. I filled it out and moved on. It counted it. They allocated it, and it was great. And I think it helped a lot of people alleviate long lines. Part of what I did this year as an election observer was moving people from going, okay, this polling place has no line and you're waiting 2 hours here. Everybody in line, you're 5 minutes away from a polling place that has no line. Go drive to it.
And they
2
said,
years ago,
thank
we couldn't
you.
do that.
Thank you, Mr. Alfred, for the tip. Right? I mean, were they grateful? Did you have to do this?
They were mostly skeptical. I got a lot of looks like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah.
And why is he talking to me
funny.
in line at the elections?
What were you
Why is he
wearing?
telling me
And
to
then-
go somewhere else?
Well, and when people realized, oh, wait, I'm actually telling them things, and I had a badge, so I looked official, and I was wearing a suit, which helps.
The suit helps. I was going to say, because that I love your Ralph Lauren fleece, but it's bright red. It kind of comes across as biased.
And you can't go up to people saying like, "Hey, you looking for some action? There's
Hey,
a better
you wanna-
line down the street."
Do you want a more exclusive vote?
You want a shorter line?
Yeah. You guys want to see a dead body?
No, I mean, at first, people ignored me, literally, didn't look at me or acknowledge that I was talking to them. And then what I did was
Because
I
they
got
thought you were
the
crazy.
election
Oh,
authority
good.
people to come with me.
The crazy
and
guy
then
in the
I had
suit.
credibility, so it worked out.
So
You got backup.
this is really illuminating for me, and I know locally, the process to get a actual mail-in ballot here and locally in St. Louis and in Missouri was not like they just sent you one and it was easy, right? I know that that's been alleged in some places, but here it's like trying to get something from the DMV or something. It's kind of a nightmare, and it's very much something that you do actively. It's not like you could just wake up and vote and go back to sleep. I did even have a friend from work who was COVID positive but asymptomatic, and they came in hazmat suits, and she voted on her front porch.
Well, that's great. That's the way it should be. I'm frankly surprised something like that would happen in Missouri. They wouldn't say, "Guess what? Suck it up, go vote," because that's been our legislature's attitude toward it.
I think it may be her tax bracket.
It probably helps.
I don't know. That's interesting. If they said, "Well, do we want her to vote?" Now, this is an interesting question because me and Joe had this conversation maybe a handful of weeks ago on the show that maybe we don't want everybody to vote. How different do you think it would be if everybody was forced to vote? Like if your vote was going to get counted one way or the other, like they claim the census is. What if it was like renewing your license plates, where the vast majority of sane, civilized people are voting, even if they don't really want to?
So that's how Australia runs its elections, right? Voting is mandatory. It's not optional. I'm not sure that it would look all that different. What I've come to the conclusion after the last couple of elections is that neither side outnumbers the other one, and the fence sitters who can be brought to one side or the other are pretty equitably split between both sides. So you would have. I'm not convinced that you don't already have a majority of low information or non-informational voters at this point, and you would just have that many more. Would it change anything? No, people vote their tribe, right? Like what is my dad? Is he Democrat or Republican? They're going to vote for that. If they don't know anything else, they're going to vote what their friends vote.
Huh. So I'm struggling with a follow-up question, because that's a great answer. I'm just trying to think about. Yeah. I had to throw water at my cat. The cats.
This needs to stay in. The throwing the water at the cat has to stay in.
Oh, I'm not taking any of this out. We're gonna wait. We're gonna leave in you getting your headphones. That's gonna be the cold open.
Look at this amateur hour.
Yeah. Do you have headphones? It's gonna be better with headphones.
It is,
and then we're gonna go to the opener.
Right.
We already
100% right.
We already did today.
Is it worth getting somebody who might be on the tech side of it to really, because then I guess describing more like if there's in-depth loopholes that maybe Al can't describe.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the tech, man.
For what?
He's talking
about the voting?
A face-to-face level. We can't.
So okay, so
you have to get somebody at the voting. What's the company now that they were alleging in Georgia?
Oh, and can I have my Yeezy flag?
You'd have to get somebody who works there, and they're probably under NDA.
So this is an interesting thing that I brought up. So when I said Chris Krebs cooks crispy bacon, that's what I just say to remember his name, because it's fun. Yeezy 2020.
Nice,
and
hey, that was a good catch too.
Thank you. Al knows me well enough to know that it's not guaranteed that I'm going to make that catch. I'm just draping my Kanye flag over myself because I'm holding out hope. And my so I asked you, what were we going with this?
You were talking about Krebs.
Chris Krebs cooked some crispy bacon. So my
understanding, I think he may be an American hero for what it's worth. That's my opinion.
Here's what's crazy is it's so crazy back and forth, because he was I first heard his name because I heard on some conspiracy podcast that he was like a vice president of something at Microsoft, and then went on to be the supervisor of election security, cybersecurity, and was also in that way potentially lobbying for Microsoft's developed software Election Guard for the Pentagon exclusively. And then, is there any conflict of interest there? But then he gets fired by Trump, and then Elizabeth Warren is the only person I've ever seen mention him on Twitter and calls him a hero for whatever he did, which I haven't had time to look into. You were saying Krebs is a hero for...
He just made a statement. Sorry.
I mean, what he did to get fired was not toe the company line that there's election fraud.
Yeah.
Right.
In large part because for 3 years, he led the effort on a national level to make sure there wasn't election fraud and there wasn't a hack.
So basically his boss's boss was saying that there was election fraud, and Chris
Being
Krebs,
the president who was saying that.
Right. And then Chris Krebs was like, I don't know. I don't have evidence to be so definitive about it. And then they said, you're fired.
It wasn't even that. He said, I have evidence to be definitive that did not happen. He came out very strongly in that regard. This was the safest and most secure election. And I think that all the evidence bears that statement out. And I think it was a very supportable statement, and he knows where the support is. He can support it.
Right.
So what happened was this noise, this cacophony of, this is the worst fraud ever perpetrated. Biden had 80 million illegal voters show up and vote. And, he said none of that happened. This was a secure election. There was no fraud. There is no evidence of fraud, which is what any person who knows anything about the evidence is saying right now. He was a hero, though, for saying it, knowing that he was going to get fired for it.
Right.
It's small H heroism, but Nevertheless,
No, you should get the Purple
so many
Heart.
people have failed that test in the administration right now.
They'd have to shoot
For
him.
someone to crawl over that bar is an act of heroism.
Well, don't you think? I think the whole situation is still a little bit problematic because you're asking somebody whose job it is to make sure that doesn't happen, to say that they didn't do their job, and there's the guy whose boss, his boss, who the product didn't come out in his favor, so he wants to tell him that he didn't do his job, and he kind of put him in a no-win situation. But also, I would always choose to defend my integrity and my integrity of a hard worker, by saying, yeah, I did my job fully and to the best of my abilities, and I can say that, because it would be really bad if he was like, there was absolutely election fraud, Trump is totally right, and that would be a really bad situation for his job, for his people, and it would probably mess things up so badly that it would become more corrupt than it is now. And I think the whole situation with Krebs is kind of problematic.
Well, there are two aspects that I think that we should unpack. Number one is, if he wanted to keep his job and keep doing it, all he had to do was fall on his own sword and say, yeah, the election was totally bunk. I didn't do my job. My team failed. Our efforts, we did our best, but someone hacked it and we're looking into it, but Biden shouldn't be president. He would still be employed and have a future in, if there was a second term of a Trump administration, he would be very high on the list to be in a good place of power.
Okay.
But secondarily,
If that was the decision, if that was the route he chose to take.
If there were real questions about whether he did his job, and there was evidence that anything that the president or those that are suggesting that the president was, the election was stolen from the president, if there was any proof behind that or any evidence behind it. And so far, through all the efforts, through all the courts, through all of the media efforts they've taken, I personally have not seen anyone with any credibility suggest that there is one iota of evidence that any of this happened. And Chris Krebs, as far as I can tell, unless some fact comes out that hasn't been revealed to the public at this point, simply told the truth. And whether or not he had an interest in telling the truth, I mean, of course he had an interest in saying, yeah, we did the best job we could. Telling the truth should be the only thing that matters.
Right.
That's great. I really enjoy that.
I just think the job system and capitalism can get muffly, but I think you're right.
Well, you're not wrong that the incentives are off, and that's true across the board.
Al, you have a lovely insight. I think you and me had a conversation that has become relevant again. You may not remember this. We had a conversation about the hypocrisy of middle or upper middle class people who are ideologically, at least vocally, very small government or anti kind of taxes and infrastructure and whatnot. We had a story a couple weeks ago that I keep getting questions about a basically, you can call them a feral village of libertarians who decided to completely unplug from established civilization, and they went to go live in the woods, but they were near a fucking military base or something, and they unleashed drugged up bears on them. Joe, remind me, am I getting?
There was no drugged up bears, but
there were fucking bears.
Nature fought back against libertarians.
There were bears. Were there not bears? I thought there were black bears.
True story. Just, it's so crazy that even the Monolith story can get more traction than this did. But
I need to read this at some point. But
there's a great.
Are you saying drugged up bears attacked a libertarian college?
My brother recapped it. My brother added that the bear. My brother thought that the military base dosed the bears to make them more aggressive towards the libertarians living in their
Thanks
feral
for citing
village.
that source.
That's what my brother added to it. I was playing telephone with myself on accident. I didn't know. Kanye 2020.
There's a great article, and it will read itself.
Check
to
him
you.
on Wikipedia.
Yeah. Yeah, our Infowars.gov.
Right. Yeah.
So do you guys have Parler accounts yet? Is that a thing?
I started one, but it, not a lot of chicks on Parler.
I'm shocked to hear that. I really thought it would
Parler,
be a
Joe, is the conservative alternative to Facebook.
Really? That is such a beautiful. That's totally just it feels like Bruce Springsteen in the 70s would be on there.
So before we get into the weeds about some of this other shit that we haven't gotten to yet that I had prepared to talk about today that
There's
we're going
other
to
stuff.
include you on, I did have a question just about from your perspective. So from the election perspective, I feel a lot better knowing kind of in more detail from you how the election kind of works at the local level and the level of conspiracy that would have to be at play for it to be kind of threatened in any way. And I wasn't necessarily intellectually worried, but I spent a lot of time driving around with my dogs, playing Pokemon Go, listening to like conspiracy theories
And
on
being
YouTube.
real worried.
And I worry. You know what I mean? Those are my two things. It's like I drive and I worry, and I eat Filet-O-Fish. There's two for you buy one get one for $1 right now. But what I always try to ask people that I talk to is how can we connect this back to kind of our normal daily experience? And one of the things I wanted to ask you is what are the things that normal average citizens should be concerned about when we're getting distracted by all the news about exclusively
Where is the
COVID-19
conspiracy?
and the election?
Well, I heard two questions there. What should normal
There's the
people
same question.
be concerned about? And the Joe asked where is the conspiracy? And I think those two things have a wide gulf between them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
There's a lot of media dedicated to distracting our attention away from our everyday lives, to be enraged about the next thing. And social media has only made this worse, right? Like there's a concerted effort, whether it's the Russians or the Chinese or the Democrats or the Republicans or the hippies or whoever is wanting you to be mad about this thing. What people should do is, I'm going to go back to the Jerry Garcia turn on, tune in, drop out, and it's not it's Timothy Leary that said that, not Jerry Garcia. So I'm sorry, but
my mom I think was born the next year.
At some level, it's pay enough attention to know where the players are and who they are, and then stop obsessing over it, because it just drives us all crazy. I mean, I think Trump is a symptom of that more than anything, in that feel good about him, feel bad about him on both sides of this thing. He's dominated our attention span for the last 4 years, and I'm frankly glad to have a boring government potentially ahead of us for a little while, where I can stop watching it, because it's like a train wreck all the time.
Yeah, it's not good. You're not watching it because it's so great. It's not like you're not watching it because you love it. You know what I mean? Even the people that love the president don't love the challenges that he's fighting every day. If they're not mad at him, they're mad at everyone.
It's what his whole shtick is. Right?
Yeah, if they're not mad at him, they're mad at everyone that he's mad at, which is several people a day, very publicly.
It's like
and it's an ever-changing spectrum of who's the Emmanuel Goldstein of the moment. What 5-minute hate are we doing today?
I don't know who Emmanuel
2-minute
Goldstein
hate.
is.
I'm sorry, I'm misquoting everything tonight.
Battlestar Galactica.
No, you're doing great. Battlestar Galactica, Stargate SG-1. I just saw a YouTube ad for Stargate.
It's not SG-1. It's Battlestar Galactica, children.
Battlestar
Go out
Galactica.
and watch it. I don't even know if you can stream it right.
You know what I really loved truly when I was a little boy? Baywatch. I fucking loved Baywatch. I remember sitting at my Aunt Jenny's little table in her kitchen, and she had this shitty little TV in the corner, like when you still did that, like there's a phone on the wall. This is like 100 years ago. And Baywatch was coming on, and just the theme song and the slow motion running on the beach with those buoys. Honey.
Mm-hmm.
Were you a Pam Anderson guy or a Yasmin Bleeth guy?
Pam Anderson, I think, at the time. I think I thought I liked blondes for a long time when I was a child. I think it was, you don't know. You're forming your tastes. I was also really into, there was like a young Latin fella one season, was there not?
I wouldn't know, honestly.
Joe, I need you to find those VHS tapes.
Joe, start Googling Baywatch guys.
Can you
and tell us who was on there?
Google the Men of Baywatch, and then if you could eBay the whole series, tapes. It's probably going to be on VHS. But I do have a VCR down here.
All right,
somewhere.
I got Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
He was on Baywatch.
Was he?
No, there was a movie.
No, he was in the movie, right? Like that was like a remake.
To make you
the Zac Efron. Was that him?
It was supposed to immediately piss you guys off when I said that.
No, I really thought maybe like OG, like when he was young or something, he was on it, and that would have blown my mind. I thought that's where you were going.
Could have happened.
You would think I would get Joe's sense of humor by now. Okay, so
David Hasselhoff.
Hasselhoff, of course, but he's not Latin.
Pamela Anderson.
Yeah.
You're looking for the Latin guy.
There's a Latin guy. Or maybe he was in the movie. I remember when the movie was coming out.
Jeremy
that was a big
Jackson.
deal. That doesn't sound like a Latin guy.
You know, they didn't have...
Can you do this on your own and come back to me with it?
Okay.
Joe, did you have a story?
I do want to get back to Joe's question about where's the actual conspiracy, because it's a compelling question.
Please.
Right?
Yes!
So, Jake,
good.
What do you think, man?
Me?
Oh, man.
Jesus. My thing is...
Thanks for bringing in the experts.
I'm wondering what, if it was malicious, the attempt to constantly saturate our attention span all the time and be in control of the media narrative, like Trump has tried to be, or if it's just because he needs the attention and he's just that captivating because it's an unprecedented sort of absurd version of The Office. And I feel both of those things simultaneously, so I don't know which way to go.
I think they can both be true and probably are. You know, it was an opportunistic sort of tick of personality that just developed into, oh my God, this worked. Let's just dial it up until let's see how far this can go.
And I mean, why do you think it's been so successful? It's so weird to think about how rigged the DNC has been in the last two elections, and kind of so openly, to think that somebody like Trump would be able to be an outsider and infiltrate the thing like that. What's that about?
Well, I mean, he got more votes than the other guys, and really not that much of a surprise when you saw the other guys on stage.
That's also true. I always had that feeling that they don't really want to win.
Well, if they wanted to win, they didn't. You know, they certainly didn't have what it took, and Hillary didn't either. You know, Biden barely pulled this off. Let's be honest. I mean, it was on the one hand a landslide victory of what 7-8 million votes. I don't even know anymore.
Sure.
And on the other hand, 100,000 votes in 2 states, and it goes the other way. You know, that's a quirk of our system, but it's the system, and you know, as broken as it is, you got to play by the rules.
The Avengers assembled.
So. Should average citizens be upset with the Electoral College, or do you think it's a real split of it really goes state by state whether or not it represents your, like, as a blue voter in a red state, like, it's not that my vote necessarily matters on a national scale as much, but go ahead.
I mean, the answer really depends on where you live.
Right.
If you like having outsized power and you live in the middle of nowhere, the Electoral College is great. If you want to live where other people live, you know, and unless you don't mind having half the vote, you know, a tenth of the vote, 100th of the vote of someone who lives in the middle of nowhere, the Electoral College is fundamentally broken, unrepresentative, and undemocratic. And there's no two ways about that. It's really not up for debate.
And so, what?
I think it's a good system.
Joe? What?
You might like it, but it's not democratic.
Yeah, so explain that. Explain it, because people are gonna.
But you can bully people into. I mean, I feel like that's the way it works. Because when you have just swaths of culture, and in the most comfortable living space on the planet, and you're in Portland and you're worried that they're gonna burn your house down, you can really bully people into voting. And I'm not saying they're making any policy to reflect the way farmers live their lives. But I mean, you want some representation that isn't just California and New York.
Oh, and that's why we have the House of Representatives and, the Senate, which is also extremely undemocratic. More undemocratic.
Yeah, I was just thinking this on the way home today. I mean, I feel like in
theory, we have 3 branches, a winner take all system for one of those branches being stacked in favor of a minority of this country is inherently an undemocratic situation.
And you're referring to the Senate in that case.
Well, the Senate is one version of that, but it's half of the legislative branch. I was talking about the executive. Winner take all system. You have one chance, and a minority. In 2 elections in the last 20 years, a minority of the people in this country have elected the guy that we all have to live with for the next 4 years. That's twice. That's 8 years out of 20. That's not a good system.
And I certainly interpret it that way. I certainly feel that way about it. It bums me out. But as I think I've said before on the show, but what keeps that in? Why isn't there more outcry or uproar or outrage.
Well, here's where you go back to, if religion was the opiate of the masses back in
Or
the
Pokemon
1800s,
Go.
what is the opiate of the masses today? I mean, what keeps people from armed revolution against a system that effectively suppresses their voice, right? And there's any number of distractions, including what we're doing right now. These are things that, back in the times of, certainly the Revolutionary War, the French Revolution, when people rose up, the communist revolutions of the early 20th century, there was no internet. There weren't video games. There wasn't, there was pot, I guess. There was alcohol, but alcohol is probably an instigant to revolution more or less than the suppressant. So, why are people sedated by all of the cultural things that we have? If you look around us, we've got so many creature comforts. Why would I go out on the streets and wield a rifle against, drone strikes? It doesn't make sense.
Drone strikes me. Come here.
I need you to explain this to Joe a little bit while I run to the restroom. Joe, you're going to sit here. I'm going to take my easy flag and I have to pee because I've had Joe get me 9 of these and he's too good at it. But listen, so the real thing that, because I'm not trying to pause this conversation even because it's going so well, that I'm thinking it's so very dystopian in a way that, like, I was just talking to Joe before we got you on, that if you go to certain neighborhoods, it looks like the apocalypse right now, except all the drive-thrus are open, right? There's just a lot more food. And because that's really when I noticed it. That's when I'm not playing Pokemon Go and driving at the same time, is when I'm in a drive-thru. I have time to look around, and it's just crazy out there. So,
well, and I mean, where are you driving through? Where are we talking about? Is this North St. Louis specifically?
Yeah. We had a whole segment about it earlier. So if you go to the intersection of Natural Bridge and Kings Highway, it's a total hellscape. It looks like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, except there's a bunch of cars, most of which with no license plates on them, in all the drive-through lines. So I'm just trying to think about, like, the Senate seems to be this place we keep getting stuck in with things that we try to accomplish, even if it seems like it's got support from places that should matter. And what keeps those kind of, there's no real checks and balances there in the Senate.
The Senate is broken.
Yeah. And so what do we do about that? And if you could also talk to Joe a little bit about the why population centers seem to vote one way, but the Electoral College is kind of keeping this other ideology alive.
There's a lot to unpack in both of those.
I know, but I need you to remember that.
Why don't you go pee, and Joe and I will go down a rabbit hole on something.
Because we're not live, so this is really just us, and I have Zoom Pro, so there's no time limit.
Well, I mean, if you got to pee, you got to pee, man. I mean, do what you got to do.
I do.
So I'll start with the Senate while you guys shuffle here.
I know.
And the problem with the Senate is Wyoming versus California. It's one thing to say, why should we be ruled by New York and California? It's a fair point. And the founders set this up to not have that problem, right? But why should Wyoming have, with I don't even know that, what do they have, like 800,000 people in the entire state? Like, it's smaller than St. Louis County. Why should they have 2 senators versus everybody else's 2 senators? It doesn't make sense in this day and age.
What is their excuse?
Well, I mean, it's a system that they were fed into, right? It was established in 1789, and it wasn't. The founding fathers had a lot of foresight on a lot of things, but they couldn't have imagined where we'd end up today. So we keep this because it entrenches certain power situations. Those senators, the party that supports them, universally Republican in rural areas that are underrepresented. The Republican Party has zero interest in changing this and will do everything it can to stop it from changing, right? Like, why would they?
Right. Yeah. I just looked at the population of Wyoming. It's like 500,000. You're right. Yeah. I mean, they don't have any excuse for, like, they don't, well, we supply the blah, blah, blah. There's no, like, some sort of monetized, reason.
I mean, that wasn't the logic that set the Senate up in the first place, though. It was that, each state is its own sovereign country, and we're a union of these sovereign countries, and they all need to be equally represented because we're equal sovereigns. The United States, state being its own nation. And, we fought this battle in the 1860s, and the states lost and the federal government won. And yet, this system of equal apportionment, which is essentially devolved into the ability to veto and ram through appointments over your opponent's objections if you happen to have a bare majority. Right. There's one party that is truly, taken it to that level, and it's the Republicans. And they've, it used to be this place of comedy and, some kind of compromise. It was this genteel institution where people,
Reagan era
observed an older way of doing things, right?
Yeah.
And that's not true anymore.
Right. Yeah, I guess I hear him coming. I guess the question,
you can keep talking.
Yeah, well, it's just so distracting.
What is?
Nothing. But yeah, I had a
You're talking about my big fat ass coming at you. Get on my seat.
Okay. I stand corrected. Maybe you can't keep talking. So, I could go on all day, Jake, about why the Senate is broken, but the math speaks for itself. At the end of the day, we've got minority rule right now in the three branches. Wow. The only one that is represents a majority of the people in this country who have expressed their will to have it be under control is the House of Representatives. Every other institution in this country represents fewer than half of the people who showed up to vote.
Mm-hmm. So can we talk about that too? So when you look at these two presidential candidates at this last election being the two winningest as far as number of votes in history,
Jesus,
what does it say that other than just population growth, what does it say that more people voted than ever when historically it's been such a problem that people vote? And what does it say that it was still so close?
Silicon Valley.
That is fundamentally the thing that was the most surprising and disheartening to me about this election. You can guess where my sentiments lie from a number of things that I've already said. You know it personally, but at the end of the day, I think both sides were hoping for a sweeping victory that showed that they were the dominant tribe, and that this was either this is the way, what we've been doing for the last 4 years, or this was an aberrant thing that was going to be put to death and never to be resurrected again. And what we got was a stalemate. Fundamentally, was we realized, I think that the numbers bear this out, is that this country, neither tribe is big enough to overwhelm the other. And we have to live together. And that is depressing because we all hate each other a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, you and me with our rhetoric just between us when we're in conversation, not something I would quote here by any means, but people that seem to harbor toxic ideologies, we really believe that comes from an evil place, because that's how it feels. Knowing the things that we know about certain issues, to know that people disagree with our stance on those, it really feels like something's wrong with them. And they must feel that way about us, about a lot of other things, which is totally their privilege. What do you say to the people that inevitably, even if it's a minority of militia, what do you say to the people that say maybe we don't have to all force ourselves to live together? The people that are so out loud saying that we want our country to be this one kind of way.
Well, it's dangerous to think that by force of arms, violence, etc., that we can force the other tribe to adhere to our own creed. And from where I sit, I don't hear that coming from my side. I hear it coming from the other side. But I'm sure there are people on the other side that hear it coming from my side. And, that's fundamentally the issue, is that we're disconnected from each other on both sides of this political divide right now. And, I keep coming back, how do I talk about Donald Trump, who I will not pretend that I like at all or understand why anyone would like.
Yeah.
What do I say to my children about him?
Right.
In a way, and they don't like him either without us telling them about it. But what do I say to them? I keep coming back to every human being is worthy of God's love. And I say that I'm an Episcopalian, so that's the framework I come from. But whether you believe in God or not, every human being is worthy of this basic respect, humanity, love that we afford each other. And so people on the other side of the aisle have to fit that profile, right? We can't keep hating each other from a distance or even close up. because we're going to rip each other apart. We're going to rip apart as a country. And if this election bore anything out, the numbers, the closeness, the furor on both sides is that people are fired up about what they believe. And there's a lot of people on both sides, and neither one of them is going to be able to dominate the other in any kind of short term. Nothing's going to change unless we change it with each other.
Yeah, you kept saying, you were talking about the Senate and how it's so undemocratic. Is that the term?
Yeah, that's what he said, Joe.
It is undemocratic. It's the right word.
You're saying that, I feel like you're saying that from a perspective of, do you believe it could be better?
I do. I mean, it's just mechanically broken, for one thing. I mean, if you look at parliamentary systems across the world in developed democracies, there's lots of ways of cutting this out. We have some real fundamental problems. Leaving the Senate aside, the House of Representatives has its own problems, and the executive branch has its problems. But the House of Representatives, let's just say you fixed it like a parliamentary system, where you don't have a winner takes all vote. You have party platforms. You have the ability to vote for proportional representation, where if 15% of the vote of a state goes to the Green Party, they get 15% of the seats. This is not a novel idea. These are things that are instituted throughout the world. And you hear anyone in this country who is in favor of the two-party system will tell you, well, it's gridlock. They've got to form all these coalitions. Nothing gets done. It seems like every other country manages to function pretty well with these systems. So, as far as I can tell, that's a bunch of bullshit. So we could fix the House that way. And then you really don't need a Senate, because everybody's voice is being heard. What does the Senate do anyway, other than stall things or fulfill
or block the
House of Lords,
right?
Analog. Sorry, Jake, you were talking.
No, I was just saying I was just helping you. That's exactly like they seem they're mostly like a roadblock for the House. At least, I mean, most people I talk to, the House approaches issues that are very real to them, and then it seems like the Senate can choose not to even hear it, which is weird. Voting it down,
you don't even have to bring it to a vote. That's right.
That's what I'm saying. Voting it down is fine. Vote it down. That's your power. You were put there. I was not. But to not hear it, is that something that we should address? I mean, what is the Democratic?
Look at Merrick Garland. It's exactly what they did. We're just not going to even consider doing our job.
And why would I don't understand why we just added old girl to the joint, and then that seemed like it seemed like it was so long before the election that we were trying to get Merrick Garland.
It was 9 months.
That's what I thought. That's a long time.
3 fucking weeks.
So what's the deal?
There's no comparison. The rank hypocrisy of that act, of those two acts, back to back. I mean, there is no intellectual honesty on the Republican side of the aisle when it comes to these things. Their only real value is power can do what it wants. And we will keep power through any means so we can keep doing what we want. That is the Republican Party.
Easy there.
Well, it is. I mean, prove me wrong.
I was telling Joe. I was telling Joe to take it easy.
Do that.
I was chanting free market.
Yeah, he was chanting free market. So.
Well, so I'm a kid. I'm.
Ow!
What?
Just you saying that with his face after you said free market, and then you say, "Look, I'm a kid." That's the clip of the week.
Listen, so the way I see it, this is really pretty broad. I'm gonna do it, Jake. You said we have all the time.
I'm ready to receive it.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna say it right now. So, and if I don't want you to interrupt me when I say it. I feel like the problem is the virtue signaling, and the social media has caused these politicians to, and especially Trump's win, I feel like has actually incentivized politicians to be more polar, to say, because now we have things like, education policy not being passed because there's like this virtue signal action happening where they say, I can't say yes to that because I would be putting, and it's like, no, you can. That's a completely separate issue from whatever your people are worried about. And so I feel like those mechanics involved make it, you were talking about how, we should get rid of that party in general. I think that might be a good, sorry, not party, but get rid of that part of the government in general. But I think I think the problem lies in, the way we are deciding to carry out politics.
Well, look. A good example is our own Senator Josh Hawley this week. He used to teach at the law school I went to, which is a great source of shame to me and has kept me from donating.
Yeah, you should be embarrassed. I wouldn't go around telling people that.
But this week he took a position that he is not going to vote to fund the military. And feel about the military. Maybe that would not be a bad thing in a vacuum.
I'm taking
but
a stand.
we're talking about a cliff where the military doesn't have the money to operate. All these soldiers now have a bunch of guns and no paychecks, which just doesn't work for any number of reasons.
Sure,
but
it does.
His rationale was because the Democrats wanted to change the names of bases to erase Confederate traitor generals from the military base.
It's an outrage.
And because we haven't taken away Facebook's right to discriminate against conservatives because Donald Trump's mad about the election.
Which is why we have Parler.
For not funding the military.
Right. Which is what I'm talking about.
Non-fucking sensical.
Right. This is a clean podcast.
No, it's not.
Is it?
No, it is.
Is it?
I heard Jake swear before I opened up the can.
Joe has to bleep them all by hand, but it's fine. He likes it keeps him focused. So
now that I know that, I will watch my language.
No, it was a joke. No, it was a joke. We don't bleep a thing.
No.
Okay, good.
Some people worry about the original like the opening segment being cleaner than the rest of it because there's some thing on YouTube or something that'll flag it.
Are you talking about your brother?
Oh yeah, my brother probably made that up too.
The unimpeachable source of all knowledge.
Right. Now he's the whole marketing division.
Yeah, he's not even here to defend himself.
People are. Yeah, you're right. Maybe we shouldn't say anything.
No, I'm just thinking I accidentally left him in. I took a phone call from him when we were recording last week and left it on the podcast, I believe.
No, you took it off.
I think I took it off. I took it off the video. I think
it was my favorite part, and you took it off.
Is it? I think it could still be in the.
Might be in the video. Yeah.
In the audio, though.
No.
Anyway. Oh yeah, Coors Banquet. Oh my! Did you dig that up out of a fucking time capsule?
I got it at Schnucks, of all places. It was all Cobra Kai. It made me look for Banquet, and I was glad I did.
Yeah. Old shows like that make me want things like Stag or Banquet.
Cobra Kai is not even an old show.
Your whole sentence, I was completely.
He knows
circles around me.
Yeah, he knows some of those words.
Yeah. So you guys, know what Cobra Kai is?
No.
Yeah, it's the bad guys from the Karate Kid, and then they had a show that was on like YouTube Red or something.
Exactly, and now it's on Netflix.
Oh yeah, I heard it was good.
Of it on Netflix, so it's still going. It is a present show. It is a thing that's happening.
But
I
like all
epic.
I really prefer
exclusively Banquet beer.
Yeah,
Coors
Banquet.
Oh.
Yeah, you can only have it at a banquet such as
that's
this.
the champagne of beers.
No, that's High Life.
That's High Life. See, it's Banquet.
Yeah.
Oh, what? Is that all you get? Is the sticker?
No, that's the whole.
It's not a sticker. It's on the can. It's part of the logo.
That's the label.
Coors is Banquet beer. It's been Banquet beer since the 50s.
Mm-hmm. What is a banquet?
Make this up. My wife doesn't believe me, but you guys are actually the first people I've ever met that are not women that didn't know that.
Okay, what the fuck is that shit?
I mean, it's just a factual statement.
You guys are the first creatures I've ever met, except for women who didn't know Coors Banquet is the banquet beer.
Al, you're
if you got a bat mitzvah, if you got some kind of a retirement party, you got to get the Coors Banquet.
Well, boys, I'm glad to be a part of your educational experience.
It's important. This is exactly why I wanted you to be on the show, because Joe needs so much of this guidance. I mean, he's got like 9 brothers and sisters. They're barefoot. They're wearing diapers. It's a fucking nightmare.
Feral.
Yeah.
You're a product. Al. You're a product of us not having enough. We people are worried about citing us on the show, so we had you on to get you hammered and talk about women.
Yeah, we need the reinforcement. We need the expert opinion on our non-expert.
He's a lawyer. He's right.
On my law firm webpage. I'm
good.
Yeah,
I'm absolutely not going to do that.
While you're posing next to your Mesa Boogie 1960 immaculate stereo.
I don't have a Mesa.
Amp.
I'm using Class D stuff now. It's all new.
Yeah, it's the future. It's the future. You
Like
know what?
transistor.
I got rid of all my Altoids tins on all my pedal boards because I feel like it's propaganda. I feel like Big Mint is trying to infiltrate my life and control my mouth.
It
And
is
I'm not going to
funny.
live in fear. I'm going to start making my own toothpaste.
I actually have a neutral one. But it's almost too small for picks. So I was thinking of going with the Altoids, but I will support you in your anti-mint stance.
Well, I just have Altoid alternatives. You know what I mean? I have my Newman's Own cinnamon mints that has a tiger on it. That's a great tin. I have an old vintage like snakebite first aid kit that somebody gave me, like a metal tin from that. So
What
I
about
think
those
there's
old cigarette
alternatives.
tins? Those would seem to work pretty well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, those are great they do the same job. You know, we're just not supporting, globalist mint propaganda.
Mine says Black Lives Matter, so I don't know about you
So
guys. but
Joe's is woke,
Yeah.
and ours are. Mine actually, I
woke.
believe, is a St. George's cross, which I think is like the British fascist symbol. I didn't realize that.
Thanks.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
so
God, did
I'm
I
on
tell
the
you
wrong
about the
side of
doozer
this one.
today? Jesus. Okay, so we already talked about this.
No,
about-
you have to explain what. So there are guitar forums where people are talking.
So
about
there's a
stuff.
guitar gear page on Facebook, and they were just having some conversation. And sometimes when I get bored at work and I'm just begging for something to do, so I go into the void of Facebook, and there's these like guys like me who are just sitting around at work bored, and they want to talk about, what's your favorite acoustic guitar amp? And then this guy, I'm just trying to scroll past this bullshit fucking thread that I don't
Jake
want to
wants
read.
to argue with every one of them.
And then this one guy just said, I
I'm on
like
some of these boards.
this
I know
guy
what he's
said I
talking
like
about.
the Vox AG50, and so I just replied, spoken like a true Zionist shill, and then I left just because I thought that was a funny thing to say. Right?
That is a funny thing to say.
I didn't even think it would even be considered serious. I thought he would laugh at it.
And now he can't get groceries.
Well, it turns out this guy's name just so happened to be Goldstein, and he's a very out loud.
You fucked up.
He's a very out loud protester of anti-Semitic sentiment, and apparently being anti-Zionist is somehow anti-Semitic. I don't know enough about the term. It's just something I heard somebody called. And what are the odds that I busted out completely at random on an actual, like, politically, like, outward member of the holy tribe of the chosen people of Israel?
You are now on the Mossad's hit list.
I swear to God, they're going to show up at my house. I don't even know how to make a joke about that. I don't know what I'm allowed to say.
No, you're actually fucked. There's no joke.
I think
you
I'm
certainly got
boned.
flagged from Ultimate Guitar Acoustic Preamps.com.
Yeah, I'm gonna get kicked out of the middle-aged
You're gonna miss out on all that.
cubicle farm fucking guitarists that want to talk about their favorite acoustic
Bunch
guitar
of
amp.
lawyers, probably picking their bases.
So
You know what I'm saying?
so Alfred, who do you really think has the right to the Holy Land?
To the what?
To the Holy Land.
Oh my God, no. I'm not going there. I'm sorry. Nobody is the answer.
Right? I mean, shouldn't it
We're
be
just
sacred?
renting.
We should
Nobody
leave
has-
it alone.
Nobody owns anything.
Especially now with COVID, you can pray from anywhere.
Free market.
I've been to church almost every weekend, and I haven't been to church once. For what it's worth.
Wait.
Oh, because you're going to church from home? You get everybody in the
Right.
living room? Do you still get dressed up?
That was like the dad version of the thing that had happened in my head, but I am actually a dad, so it came out like I was a dad. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So can I ask you about that? And I don't want to I want to know where they were all conceived. No. For people that don't know
I
you
don't know.
that are listening to the show. So Alfred's also a father of 4 or 10 beautiful children, and
4 to 10.
4 to
in there.
10 somewhere in there, and there were 4 on the Christmas card, I believe.
There are 4.
And so what role how does that change your perspective or your level of interest in some of these more kind of broad national conversations that we were talking about? You mentioned it earlier that when adults on TV that are in charge of things act dumb, it's hard to know what to tell your children. My first feeling of that was when we found and killed Osama bin Laden. I felt bad for the kids that had never heard of him before, because the kids that were young enough to know, because it just seemed negative to be celebrating so openly that we shot somebody in the face. So I'm thinking with the narrative politically now, especially with some of your daughter, I believe, is the oldest, and she's
second.
She's second. That's right. Okay, great. So those two are definitely got to start hearing some things and crafting some opinions, even at an early age like that. So, kind of, how do you balance those two things?
Well, it's a good question. It's changed my perspective in a lot of ways. Like what kind of, I could be as outspoken and angry and just voice my opinion all the time. But how do you do that when you're molding another person in a way that's objective? They have to be able to get through this world. And certainly the reality of this country is that you're going to have to deal with people that don't agree with you and that don't see the world the way that you do. So how do you move through that? And I keep coming back to, and this is, I don't mean to get hokey about religion, but there's, whatever you believe in a spiritual way or religious way, at least gives you the vision to sort of think about, how do you raise a child in this world in a way that makes sense to make them not be a terrible human being? Because if they follow my example, they'll just be terrible human beings. So I got to tell them things that I don't do so that they'll be better than me.
Right. But, and we talk about that. Like I think our last episode together, Joe and I really discussed kind of some of our reflections of the parenting we experience as children and kind of how that contributes to your value system and how your goal is for your kids to start at a place better than where you started. And I think for my brother and I, that was certainly the case that our parents accomplished that. You've certainly accomplished it, I believe. I don't know anything about how you grew up. I know you and your dad are named the same thing. That's all I really know. But so I would assume.
Isn't that like a sign of privilege right there?
Right. I would yeah, exactly. Yeah. Family names. That's a Prince song. And, but I think that's an important distinction is that I'm sure you feel like your kids are probably growing up with more resources or privileges than you did.
And they're probably superior of everybody, huh? Because
you really wanted it to be that way, right? Because that's the goal for everybody. So I also think that that's important to consider. Like you're talking about what to teach them and instill them with. You want them to be better than you.
Well, and they're kids of privilege, clearly, right? Like as you've sort of identified. I was a child of privilege.
Sure.
And I probably was. And I definitely was. But, hearing my parents' example of like, when I was your age, I didn't have any of this stuff. That's true by definition for anyone having kids because this stuff didn't exist.
Sure.
There was no internet. Look at Xbox or PlayStation.
There was no internet.
I grew up with like Atari 2600. It was incredible. And what they have now, I wouldn't be able to get off the couch if I had it.
Yeah.
So how do you take that world that we now live in and make a kid want to go out and do something useful?
Yeah.
Like there's so much non-useful stuff to do that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so great. It's seriously like WALL-E, where they sit. Did you see WALL-E with your children?
Yeah, totally.
So it's like they sit in the chairs and they hover around and they're just
Why
basically on a VR thing. I don't understand. Now they're talking about the VR pornography. Can you imagine if we had VR pornography when we were in junior high, Alfred?
I had found Playboys at best. It wasn't a thing that existed. Like I remember the first GIFs that came out that were like the naked GIF.
Yeah.
I was like 16 and it was amazing. It was the best thing that ever happened.
It was psychotic how
it was EGA graphics. It was 16 colors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man.
That's how old I am.
No, I remember. I was younger than you when that started, but I remember. It was like the moon landing.
It was a revelation in our lives. Yeah. It was, you didn't have the old man's, stack of Playboys that you found in the cabin of the woods is the only porn that you got. Now it was like you could pipe it directly into your dad's machine and you had to figure out how to hide it and hope that he wasn't smart enough to find it.
You know what's crazy is when you get older too, you reflect on those experiences and you realize that those kind of random characters that were older that had cabins in the woods, they were all fucking drug addicts.
They had to be, right? Like
I think about this guy.
This random cabin
I was like
residential
17,
woods,
and I had these really pretty girlfriends that I hung out with, right? Like platonic friends, but my friends were all pretty girls. That's who I like to hang out with. And so,
I get that.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I don't call me crazy. I like him to look good. And so we used to go see this guy. He lived in this apartment behind Ethan Allen next to the fucking Shop and Save, and he would hook us up with booze, but he never even really tried to hang out with us.
Can you imagine now at your age, and you're significantly younger than me, Hanging out with some fucking high school kids?
Even for a minute. I don't know how we got a hold of him. I don't know how it's possible that anyone got a hold. He wasn't somebody's fucking brother. Like, I remember going to the Unitarian church parking lot to meet the chick's cousin that had a 30 rack of Natty Light. Like, that was one thing because he's coming through and he's trying to be sweet. But like a random dude who doesn't even want to hang out. Like, if you're trying to get people back to your place to hang out with you, that's kind of gross because we were underage. But I understand the motivation, even if it's creepy. But like the idea, he didn't even want to hang out. I don't get it. I don't know what he did with that information. He scanned my body with his eyeballs and went back to his lair and did whatever he wanted with that information. I just don't understand. It's crazy to think as an adult that, like, I remember being in this country town in the middle of nowhere next to my dad's hunting lodge, I guess we'll call it. And he was working on a building, so we got to wander around. And not only are there stray dogs everywhere, but there's fucking feral hillbilly children in this little fucking town,
Mountain Dew,
walking around. And we go into this.
bottles.
We're hanging out with these two kids that live there. We go into this house, and this couple is still in bed smoking cigarettes, but they're not in a bed. They're in a pull-out sofa. But it's like their house. Like they just sleep in the living room on a pull-out.
Because where the TV was.
And then we
You
sat on their couch.
You can't just like give this information and not give us the specifics.
No, I'm sorry. You got to go deep. And they were watching Ricky Lake or some shit. And then the dude went and bought cigarettes for these like 13-year-old boys we were hanging out with. Psychotic. Joe, do you ever smoke like a Marlboro Smooth?
No, but I'll tell you, there was a family that I hung out with when I was younger they didn't just like want to help out with that, but I think they wanted me to drink and smoke with them. I think they wanted to be surrounded by young kids. And I mean like 14-year-olds, but they didn't want to like fuck them or anything. But I went to a New Year's Eve party with the same people years later. And I go over there and this house is full of like everybody that what's the electronic cigarette that what is
Vape?
Juul. It's the whole house is full of everybody that Juul is trying to market to. They're like these like kind of just musky kind of dudes that like all their hair is really long and they could be 14, they could be 19, but they're clearly younger than me. Full of the house is full. And the only two adults there again are those two parents and then their kids. And I think it's like came full circle. They finally got their dream. So I think there is something in the Midwest about surrounding yourself by young people. I don't know. There's a weird split because there's all the kids that think that there's some sort of accomplishment with being older. Like I have family members that are just constantly really proud of I'm elder, that whole thing, like this weird, like, but then there's also the parents who really want to be young forever. So I don't know. It's a weird thing.
So Al, if you could just sum all that up and just fix that problem for us, that'd be great.
I got nothing for you except an anecdote, which is, I remember the parents when I was in high school, smoking pot with my friends, and then their mom would come in and smoke pot with us, and we were 16, and these usually single mothers in my experience. It wasn't usually couples.
Oh yeah,
but the single mom would come in. She was probably 35. Sort of had a kid young and still wanted to party.
Probably a woman.
I thought it was the greatest thing and it was the coolest, and I wish I had parents that way. And like by the time I got to college, I realized I was really glad I didn't.
Right.
Yeah, like you lose touch with those kind of people so quickly. Like you have those weird experiences, like one summer, and then you never see those people again. It's like, good God, are those people?
It was like almost one-offs a lot of the time.
Oh my God, totally. It's like, are those people still alive? Oh God, remember the guy?
Did that really even happen?
Yeah,
it's like vague memory now.
My mom has a story. Maybe I shouldn't tell her story.
Yeah, man.
Something about though that like
stories, man.
A guy.
She should have your mom on to tell her own story.
That's what I'm saying. Remind me, Joe. Write this down. That we have to ask my mom about the time she was in high school and her friend's dad had her get him all dressed up in drag so he could go to a party that was then canceled, and then he just come back and hung out at the house with all his daughter's girlfriends in drag. Write all that down. Mom's going to tell that story.
Wait, was that you?
No, I wasn't born. My mom was a child. What? What the fuck?
No, you said dressed up some
It's not
kid.
an absurd question at this point.
Yeah.
Have you seen the cover of the podcast? Yeah. I think it's a great cover.
I was there
like the
when
cover.
maybe not that picture, but certainly your birthday show.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I was re-listening to that. So Al played bass on the live record I was plugging last week that we'll talk about here in a minute. It's on Spotify, but we didn't know COVID was going to happen. We also didn't even know that we were going to release that recording as a live album. But
no, that was a lark.
Yeah.
Like you just did it
because
no one told me that I was recording an album.
Right. Yeah, I just decided that the recording was salvageable enough that and it really takes you back to like being there. Now that I can't go to shows, I was just telling my wife this.
I feel like I'm there right now.
I didn't used to like to go to listen to like a lot of like live albums and stuff because I'm like, well, that's a different thing and whatever. But now that we can't go to shows all the time, it's like, please, like I'll take them all.
Yeah.
You drive around and you play Pokemon Go and you eat tacos and you just blast like Frampton Comes Alive.
You hit on there. I do want to talk about before my time is up with you, which is that what the fuck Taco Bell? The menu is so reduced,
brother. That's
I
a
don't
heavy
even know what to do.
It's a heavy theme of this show is fast food, and especially how fast food has been negatively impacted by COVID. And a lot of that is I've had Taco Bell a couple of times, and I go like in the middle of the afternoon where there's no way they're not open because otherwise it's such a crapshoot over by me. But no, the menu is vanishing.
How late they're open now. It's not a thing that you can count on.
No, I went to the one in Maplewood, and Google had told me they were going to be open till 11, and then they came out at 9:50 and told us all we had to leave because of. Yeah, there was like a ordinance.
9:50.
Yo,
Taco Bell closed.
Wynn's fourth meal. Hello, it wasn't even 10 o'clock yet. Wynn's fourth meal.
I'll tell you, the mainstay through this whole thing has been Jack in the Box, who is still just Jack in the Box.
I've been telling people, Jack in the Box. The world ended at Jack in the Box a long time ago. They've been doing the same operation. I just had Jack in the Box the other day. I had the most glorious breakfast burrito at 1 p.m. because that's how the fucking world should be.
I mean, it is the beauty of Jack in the Box is tacos whenever, breakfast food whenever.
At the same time, even. Like at the same time.
Doesn't matter what time of day.
Jack in the Box is kind of like an inverse Jeep Wrangler to real estate.
It's so
let me
crazy.
Explain that analogy.
I was already having this conversation with my brother today that we were talking about. Apparently, I did this podcast with my brother on the way home that we talked about Jack in the Box. He needs to go back to Jack in the Box. He thinks milkshakes from fast food restaurants are phlegmy, but he's thinking about McDonald's. He's not thinking about the OG chocolate milkshake from Jack in the Box is a fucking bop.
They have good milkshakes.
Joe, you were saying?
I think it's funny how no matter where you are, if Jack in the Box was a private company and like had no other affiliates or whatever, it would be funny. I think there's no position in the Jack in the Box franchise where you're like respected, like, oh, I'm the CFO of Jack in the Box. See,
I'll say this, having worked with a couple of fast food franchises, you'd be surprised.
You'd be surprised. They're pretty respected.
At the top level, they're quite respected.
Drinking a lot of Coors
money
Light
speaks,
banquet,
right?
Yeah.
I'll leave my clients and former clients unnamed, but they weren't Jack in the Box.
Oh well, thank God.
Actually, no.
We want names.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, let's start that. Yeah, I got Mossad coming after me, and motherfucking Jack is gonna show up with a hatchet.
Jack is gonna put his spicy fingers through your throat.
That would be really funny if it was a Mossad agent dressed up like Jack in the Box, like Jack from Jack in the Box, like with the human hands and just the big plastic head.
Al, you've got to be a regular on this show, man.
This has been so great. This has been such a great use of my time.
This is the ideal trio.
I feel like we're just hanging out, honestly.
We are. We have just
to get through all that election bullshit where you actually asked me questions, and now we're just talking.
Yeah. Now we're really opened up, and it's been really good. We want to keep an eye on a lot of this stuff as it moves forward. I'm hoping that you're right. I'm hoping that cooler heads will prevail, and then the election fraud kind of conversation will be just kind of a last kind of hurrah, and then it'll be boring for a couple years. And I'm hoping that it's boring in a good way, in a way that's productive. And I'm hoping we learn from this weird time. That's one thing we haven't even talked about. I was supposed to have lunch with you to talk about my LLC.
Then COVID.
The very week COVID happened. It was
that week.
Last time I went out was March 13th, and then I had
to go to Southwest Diner. It was going to be the bomb.
It was going to be Tuesday, I think.
It was a Tuesday at Southwest Diner. That's still on my calendar. for whenever all this shit ends.
That was March 17th. That was supposed to happen, but the world had already closed.
It was the week after the world ended, essentially. That was like the last week I was in the office.
Yeah.
Limited liability company.
What?
Oh, son, I can go on about limited liability companies if you ever
What
want
is
to get
that?
down.
Oh no.
That's what it is. You were just starting an LLC.
No, an LLC, like to incorporate, like to have my own organization, so I can claim all of this stuff as expenses and write it off.
This is one where I'm a published author, kids.
Yeah, Alfred is also a published author and an adjunct professor of law, and a smooth dude on the bass. He's got a really sweet Rickenbacker he bought himself for Christmas from his kids a couple years
my
ago.
bass skills are such that you talk about the instrument that I play as opposed to how good I am. That says it all.
Oh, well, that's how good it is. That's my favorite part. Is the big long Rick.
Your whole story
It is sweet.
Your whole story sounds like a Hugh Grant movie.
Al, I'm going to keep you on the line while we wrap up so that we can debrief. But let me get my.
Can I get another beer?
Yeah, please get another beer here. While we cut a couple things. We're not going to talk about Elliot Page right now because of how Joe responded to my prep for the Monolith. So we'll come back to gender identity and transphobia next week.
With the lawyer.
Yeah,
So wait,
we're gonna.
I missed your last episode. I've tried to keep up, but
Well,
I've been so busy.
that was our first ever guest on the show. It was just a solo episode between me and Zaza Goodbreak, the MILF rapper, whose work I've shared with you. And
I think I ran into her at your house one day. Like you had a back-to-back with her.
yeah, sometimes I have
God.
standing appointments, which is why I wanted to, develop an LLC.
That is not a joke. He does.
No, seriously,
He
sometimes there's people.
overbooks constantly.
When am I home? I'm not. I'm on my campus 50 hours a week. I can't be home all the time. And when and then I like to go to bed at like 8:30. Once I eat dinner, it's kind of over. What's left to look forward to? So I got to go to sleep. Guys, this has been another crazy episode of Jacob V Weekly. I want to thank Alfred so much for being here, Joe for being back after a couple weeks. We're really on the road where we want this podcast to go and how we want it to be. These first few episodes have been very experimental publicly, like we mentioned, so we're glad you guys are still here with us. I'm keeping Al on the line because I think my camera filled up with data because I didn't plan to go this long, so I need Zoom to record my face right now. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Google, whatever. You can also find original music by Jacob V and Too Deep on all of your music platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Deezer. You could Bing it. Exclusively on Bandcamp, you can find music by my older brothers in arms, our retired outfit Battlestag. Love those guys. You can follow me on Twitter at Malachi Envy, on Instagram at Jacob Allen V. I also curate a monthly playlist since May on Spotify, another end of the world kind of hobby of mine. I have one for each month, so if you search for Jacob V's favorite songs, you'll see all of them. Stay tuned for bigger and better things from us, more guests, more content, more gumph. Gumph!
It says, it's a question mark. Gumph?
Gumph?
That's the way.
Gumph.
Gumph.
Jacob V Weekly. High five.
I love you, Dad.